cover today. I'm going to go quickly. I thank our sponsors. Today we will be discussing some updates regarding the EBEWE, so we have to call it the ordinance, really focused on the next phase. So benchmarking, we'll talk about some resources, a little bit of background for those that want a refresher, but really focusing on some examples of scenarios for the next phase, which is the performance phase, again, related to actually seeing some savings and make the most sense for your building. So go ahead and get started. As usual, the lines will be muted. The webinar is being recorded, and slides and will be circulated along with key takeaways before the end of the week. We'll have some time for questions at the end, I hope. I'm going to go fast, and hopefully we cover will answer questions. That's the goal. I run the LA Better Buildings Challenge. We also tasked with staffing the Energy and Water Efficiency Resource Center, which is open to all things that are covered by the ordinance. So we're here as a resource to help navigate that whole process. That's the website right there. The Buildings Challenge is a leadership initiative. It's this network of high-performing buildings throughout the city. We offer a range of additional services. Back on the ordinance, I think everybody's familiar with this. Again, I'm going to go very quickly through this piece. Benchmarking, now in the second year of that, buildings 50,000 square feet and up. The performance phase, which is what we're really going to focus on today. And I'll also touch on public disclosure, which is already starting to happen, actually, per the ordinance. This just shows that this is LA is not the only city with a law like this. Most other big cities and even some small ones have similar laws. So this is becoming just a standard practice, benchmarking and disclosure. Questions about do I need to comply with this? This ordinance that I'm speaking about today is only for buildings in the city of LA. DWP would be the electricity provider. This website here, Navigate LA, is a good way to check. Sure. And there's a map there that shows that the border of the city does jog around and areas where there could be a question. So if you have a question, that's where you can check. These people have asked, the initial penalty is $202. Does compound and is subject to some pretty significant double-digit interest. So it can get into an area that's uncomfortable within 6 to 9 months. It can get up to about $800. So the fine is there as not what we want to do. The point is that this is valuable information that helps as a starting point for planning projects that are going to improve the performance of the building, save money, and ultimately pay for themselves multiple times over. But there is that fine, and things that don't comply remain out of compliance until they actually do the work. You can just pay the $200 and call it good. That stays there and continues to compound on double-digit interest. And compliance status is being published now for the buildings that benchmarked last year. So that's the buildings 100,000 square feet and greater. When 2018, June 1st is the deadline for buildings 50,000 square feet and up. Notices went out in early January. Those are sent by law to the owner of the property at the address of record for the property. So we know, and everyone's aware, that that's not necessarily sending notice to the folks who are dealing with this ordinance. So it's important that we all understand that that's the technical requirement, but this responsibility for dealing with this may fall to a property manager, an admin, a consultant. So buildings over 50,000 square feet should have gotten a notice. If you didn't, it may have been lost somewhere. This is an annual thing, so built that benchmarked last year. The larger buildings got to do it again this year. I'll just call out the bold words here. Again, trying to get quickly to the end, the new information. Holding data for the past calendar year. submitted via Energy Star through what's called a benchmarking report, and it goes electronically to Building and Safety, and that's due annually by June 1st. So that basic annual benchmarking requirement. On the Energy Star, EA Energy Star website, talk about general ways of using the tool. There's some different requirements in LA, so it's important that we be aware of those. Specifically, we're talking about whole building data, including tenant space, and water needs to be in there. So that's not required to come up with an Energy Star score, but water is required by the ordinance, and there's a way to input that into Portfolio Manager. It also wants us to include structure and subterranean parking. So if it's attached, structured parking above ground that's attached to the building, so not an open parking lot, but structured parking with a roof, should be included with the building. Same with subterranean. So those are differences. It's important that that be included. So a statewide law, we've been getting questions about this. Do I have to do both? How do these things relate? I don't want to do things differently for one, not the other. And the goal is that you want to. So the city and other cities around the state that have laws similar to ours are actively working with the state to make sure that there's not a duplication of effort and that we're coordinated on communications about this so it's not confusing. So sign up for updates. I don't have a lot of concrete updates other than that to share at this time, but please do know that we're in communication and working to make sure that this is not a duplication of effort and is not confusing for people. Go ahead and follow the no process for the LA ordinance if you're in LA, or your local ordinance if you're in San Francisco or somewhere else that has a local ordinance. On this diagram before, I'm going to focus on the bottom half of this, which is the performance phase. So we will be circulating the slide. I think this diagram looks a little complicated, but actually does a really good job of showing all the different ways that this can go, and to talk through some examples today. The is who has to do what and when is determined by the IN, the Assessor Identification Number. Same thing as APN. Been some people use the terms interchangeably. The same thing. So this is the table that you would reference to figure out when is the relevant performance period for my building. And I'll give some examples later. So to the topic of today's webinar, you've heard a lot about the background that if we need it, I want to pointing people to the benchmarking guide. So it is comprehensive for most buildings. It should illustrate the whole process step by step. We know there are exceptions and unique cases. This is designed to handle most of the typical cases, and we're available to help handle solutions to the less typical cases. So what's in here, it's organized by section for each major step, and this includes the processes with building and safety to register and pay the fee, and then to submit the report at the end of the whole thing, and steps in between from setting up or updating your portfolio manager account to the data in there, whether you're your tenants are billed directly, the building's master metered, and you're billing back to tenants. The instructions for how to get the data from utilities or from your existing bills or other utility management systems are in the guide with a step. And so if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend looking. It'll make the whole thing a lot more doable. I'll go into this in the guide, but benchmarking master metered buildings. The main point I wanted to make with slide is that building is master metered, meaning you're billing back the tenants for electricity, gas, water. You do not need to request the data from the utilities. In fact, you shouldn't. It's going to take much longer, and so ties up the system and makes it slower for buildings that are direct billed, where the tenants are directly billed who need to request this data. So you already have it, buildings are metered, you're billing back the tenants for this information. their consumption, it's faster for you and reduces some strain on the system if you can upload yourself. And so we've got instructions on how to do that in benchmarking guide, section 3. It's really not that hard to do, and it's much quicker, we'll say. So common master metered property types, high-rise office, hotels, industrial warehouse, condos. If your property is one of these types, or your clients are one of these types of properties, you probably already have all the data that you need from bills or some other system that you may use, and you can just upload that directly. So again, all of that, section 3 of the guide. A screenshot looking inside the guide. One notice is that the cost information is not required, just the consumption. That's all that the city's looking for. If it's a direct metered property, meaning the tenants are billed directly, like it's a multifamily apartment property or a lot of retail centers, the tenants pay directly to the utility, you do need to request the data because the ordinance is asking for the aggregate whole building data. So you only have access to the common area and the tenants are paying directly for their share. You don't have that data, you need to request it because it's the responsibility of the owner to submit the aggregated data. So we also have instructions for that, sections 4 and 5. There is some back and forth with the utilities through that process, and so it's important to be checking your email, checking your junk email. We have screenshots of what those communications look like, who they're from, et cetera, in the guide as well. So, again, we put that together to try to answer most questions about what does that process look like. It does take some time. So again, if you are a master metered property and billing back to tenants, it's going to be faster for you to just upload the data yourself if you have it already. This process takes about a month. Deadline is June 1st this year. So technically, AB 802, there's still some coordination going on, says that tomorrow, March 1st, is the deadline to request the aggregate data if you need to. So there's no penalty if you don't, but clock is ticking. So if you are family or retail or other property where the tenants are billed directly, again, go ahead and request that. And that includes multi-tenant properties where you might have a single tenant or a couple tenants that are billed directly because they're a big user, like a data center or a post-production company or a trading desk or something. If you don't have access to that data, you still have to get it. And the utilities will provide it to you, but you have to follow that process. Another look inside the guide. He has some requirements in terms of documentation you need to make sure that they can release the data to you. It can take some time to put that together as well. They're looking to streamline that process with AB 802, but the process is not updated yet. So it's going to be the same as last year. So if you haven't started already, please start as soon as possible. If you have any questions, all the details on how that works is in the guide. On this, there are IDs that you need to keep track of, and so in the guide is a little table that you can print out, however is easiest for you to access it, and note down your billing ID, which comes from Building and Safety, the IN, so you can use that to look up what's the performance phase, which we'll get to. And then your admin ID is from DWP. So there's a few different things you need to keep track of, and we recommend doing that in one place. I always lose passwords to things. So created this sheet because it's a challenge to keep track of all that for busy folks. A look at the SoCal Gas piece of the guide. The process is a little different. They actually create the virtual meter for you, and they allow you to self-certify. That's where DWP is headed, not there yet. So the process is a little bit different. All on the guide, and we have links to the actual websites where you would do all of this. The thing that's really important is that the data be good, and it's actually a requirement to run the tool, it's circled here in the little red box in Portfolio Manager called Data Quality Checker, and it will run a series of diagnostics on the data that's been inputted, and that has to be run before the report's submitted, and the city can actually see whether or not that has occurred. In the next year, EPA has added some more features to Quality Checker. Will show the city whether the errors have been fixed, and so I'll talk on the next slide about some common errors, ways to fix them. But so you want to fix those before it's been submitted to the city, because they will see that it's not complete or not correct. So these common ones. There are others that can come up. There are gaps in the data. That's no fault of yours. That's a utility side issue, and only the utility can fix that. So if there are gaps or overlaps, it's something to follow up with the utilities on, and we have contact information at the end of our slide deck here for types of situations, or if you have an account rep, they maybe help you. If you water, a lot of folks, we've been using Portfolio Manager for a long time. Water wasn't part of it before. Well, water does need to be here now. For ordinance, Atlanta and some other cities are required to. We have, again, steps on how to do that in the waste. That will come up in Data Quality Checker. There's no waste or materials meters in there. You don't have that in there. That's not part of the ordinance, so you can disregard that one. A couple of other updates. LABBC is posting the compliance status, so this is a screenshot from the site that you see there. That's posting compliance status. That's updated every week, and so if you have or have not complied, it will be shown there. Good to check and make sure what shows there matches with what you think the case for last year, and make sure that looks accurate. And this is also, I should point out, a good place to, if you have questions about the building ID, the buildings are listed with the building ID and the building address. So it's good to make sure that that is all straight. If you have a question about the building ID, here's where you would look it up. I said there's certain issues that only the responsible party can answer. They cannot answer questions about parts of the process that they do not control. So in order to ensure that your interactions with any of these entities is productive, I recommend keeping your inquiries focused on the things that they can actually control. So EBS is where you would go for cloud building ID, registration, payment, it's related to notification, basically, and then registration, submittal of the report. That DBS is able to answer. They're not going to be able to get into questions about data from the utilities, how to mark the building. That's not the part of the process that they are handling. So just ones related to these items that I've noted here. Department of Power only can answer questions about the status of requests that you've submitted or issues with the data that they've provided to you. Anything else about deadline, registration, benchmarking, again, that's not their purview. Just about the DWP data requests. Same for CalGas. Questions to them should be about the state of a request you've submitted or issues with the data provided. Instructions on how to request and everything, that's all covered in the guide. So if you have any questions about how to benchmark, what data do I need, all of that stuff is covered in the guide. If you still have questions or you have a special case, my team at the Resource Center is happy to handle that, and also planning for the performance phase of the ordinance, which again is going to be the bulk of what I'll talk about today. So please keep this in mind. It's we would like everybody know everything, but there's just so many moving parts here that everybody is focused on their piece. So if you have a general question or questions about process with benchmarking or planning for the and key questions for the other partners involved specific to what they can actually respond to. Source that's available in case this is just not something that you can or want to take on right now internally is hire a consultant to handle it for you. We partnered with the EPA to create a directory of service providers, and the EPA are the ones that run Energy Star. So visibility on the back end of who's benchmarking what buildings, who has certified what buildings. So what we do is issue an RFQ, which is available on our website. Service providers respond to that. They provide references. They provide buildings of what type of benchmarked and or certified in our area, specific zip codes that we give them. With EPA to make sure that all checks out with what they do on the back end. References, we confirm licensure, and if it looks good, they get this directory. So the alphabetical order, but we're providing some transparency about who's done what types of buildings, how many in our area. So if you want to hire to handle this for you, that can be a cost-effective, time-effective way to go. And we've done some of that work to shrink down the universe of providers for you here. We're also going to start doing an ongoing testing because this is kind of complicated. I won't say it's not. So make sure that if you're hiring a consultant, they know that they actually understand this process and they're not going to tell you something wrong. So we're in the mode of trying to folks that are actually going to be doing this work, and they have to pass our test to stay on. Last but not least, there's a template RFP available for download. If you want to see a few different proposals, it's always an idea to benchmark your buildings. That's there, free to edit it however you like, and issue that to providers off of this list, or if you have others you want to include, please send it away. We're happy to do some of that vetting. Another source I want to make sure everybody's aware of is the building information online. It's an LABBC website. This is where they're publishing the compliance status and benchmarking metrics. So there's the list that just shows the compliance status and building ID. So that's want to go, I'll go back to that. To check your building ID, what does the city show as far as my compliance status? They're showing actually the benchmarking metrics, so Energy Star score, EUI, and water use intensity by building. So up live for the buildings 100,000 square feet and over, and they're adding in the buildings 50,000 square feet and over, and so forth going forward. So if you'd like to take a look at that, it's the website there. So a little over half the time left to talk about the performance phase. So planning for that, the first thing to do is to figure out what's the period of time for me. If I've had the building for 10 years or I just took over this building, what's the period over which I need to complete other phase? There's lots of options, so we'll talk through that. So first is to figure your AIN. That's the website where you can do that. Based on that, figuring out what's the due date and looking back to see what's the performance period. I'm going to show some examples on how to do that. Make sure that you have the whole building data for that entire period. And you may have started using Energy Star in 2016, and your performance period starts before that. You make sure you get credit for any projects that you may have done prior to that date. So make sure that that data is all complete, and go back and get that up. And then think about what makes sense for your building based off of the building's doing, or think might be some opportunities to save? What are your goals, your strategy with this asset? Budget and time, of course, is going to be based off of how much time do I have, how much do I have. That could impact what makes the most sense to do first to get over this piece of it. So I'll go through some examples. I covered this, but there are a few different ways that you can meet the requirements. At the bottom, there's an or. As you see, there's an or between each of the options. There's energy performance and water performance. So I will read through all of those. We'll do some illustrative examples, but what's the combination of energy and water performance actions that make the most sense for your building? What will your budget allow the time that you have? It only have, this starts in 2019, so it's 28 now. If that first group, your AIN starts with 0, and you've got basically on then to performance, that may be a different answer than if you've got a few years. Maybe you've got some more time to get some bigger projects between now and then. So that's the first thing to figure out. Does it make sense to try to hit those performance targets? Do you have some cost-effective opportunities? Are there different maintenance issues, equipment replacement needs that make sense to just go ahead and do and hit those reduction targets? Is the building performing really well? If you did a little bit more, could you get Energy Star certified, or already performing really well and you just need to formalize that? Or don't have a whole lot of time, or I'd like a roadmap to make a longer-term plan, then maybe doing an audit and retro commissioning to start with makes the most sense. So we'll explore these options with you once you've finished the benchmarking phase. So what we for buildings over 100,000 square feet, we focus on the larger buildings because just time constraints. This document was an energy and water savings plan, we call it. It's basically a snapshot after your benchmarking data, so we can see how you're doing relative to the requirements of the ordinance. We can put this together for you at cost pretty quickly and lay out different options, and I'll walk through this in some detail so you see the elements of the report. I know no one can read that page up there now. The first thing is to figure out the reporting date and compare and the performance period, and then compare that to the targets. So, this is an example building, obviously, but the report will say, based off of your AIN, here's a relevant 5-year performance period for you. This example building's got an STAR score of 49. It's almost right in the middle. An E and water use intensity that's based off of the portfolio manager data that was shared with us, and there are a 15% energy reduction, which is one way of meeting the performance targets. With this water, similarly, and in this case, it's probably unlikely that this building will jump 26 points to get up to Energy Star certified at a 75. So we're going to need to look at other options. I'll show how that works. You know what you've done and what the opportunities are in your buildings, but what we can do based off of CBEX data, we know for each type of property, what's the typical end-use breakdown for electricity, gas, and I'll get to the next slide on water. And basically, what are the top 3 areas you might look at? And you may say, well, I've done everything, or no, I haven't looked at that. So this puts dollar figures based off of your actual data, and you may decide to tackle the projects that have the highest percentage of your cost, absolute cost. That's up to you. But this is meant to be a conversation starter. This is not intended, we realize it's not tailored to your specific building. So this is based off of, again, general end-use breakdowns from CBEX, which is the data set that underlies Energy Star. So it's relevant for this purpose. If we pull the end-use breakdown by property type from EPA Water Sense, which is the best source we're with that's a big enough data set to do that. So same thing, based off of that general end use breakdown for each type of property, we come up with the top 3. If you haven't done these already, these are the things you should really consider. Again, consider the options. What makes the most sense for your property? There's a few different options. Are there, does that end use breakdown look about right? Have you hit those top 3 opportunities in electricity, gas, and water? You have cost-effective opportunities there. Are pretty close to Energy Star. If you pushed a little bit, could you be certified? Or would you like to do an audit and perform commissioning, which is basically fixing things, tuning the building? And how much time do you have to do all this? That's really the key, and budget, of course. So here's examples. In the building, the AIN ends in 0. That's run for figuring out the performance period, that 5-year look back. It is Energy Star certified and reduced water 8% over the time period, 2015 to 2017. So how high? These kinds of questions that are on the quiz that we give to the service providers in order to be listed in the directory, because they really need to know this inside and out. We can answer this question for partners, but this is where the options, and so understanding this is important. So the answer to this one, because the AIN ends in 0, is that the compliance date is on the front end. Actually, that's why we put this one first, which is January through June of next year. So it's time to start planning. And the event performance period, that 5-year look back, is from 2015 to then, right? 5 years prior to the due date. Since the building is Energy Star certified, they're exempted as long as they keep that in place for 2 of the 3 years preceding the compliance date. So that's next year. Let's say they get it this year and next year, they're good. This year and last year, they're good. On the water side, though, just because they're Energy Star certified does not mean met the water requirements. So they've done some good work to reduce usage 8% so far, but that doesn't meet yet the 20% reduction, and haven't had a water audit or performed water commissioning. So they still have to look at water. So energy side, again, they've certified, so they're good. So if you can get up to Energy Star certified, you certified 2 of the 3 years preceding the compliance date, you're good. So that's one way to get there, and it has to be certified, not just a score of 75. It has to be certified through EPA and signed off on by a professional engineer or a registered architect. That's the requirement on that, so they know that the data is real. It's been checked by a licensed professional. Not all buildings can get Energy Star certified. They're increasing the number of types that can. If you're one of those types that can't right now, you can still demonstrate that your building is in the top 25%, and for that type of property in this climate zone, and an engineer or architect can help you do that. Some way, in this example, buildings coming up in the front end of the performance phase, it's Energy Star, so let's just make sure it stays that way. It's good. Still have to look at water, though. So 2 options there, as we highlighted before. Get a water audit and implement the retro-commissioning measures. So basically fixing leaks. These calls out some specific standards. They're not actually that specific. So we're working with Building Safety, DWP, to put some more specific definitions in place. But at this point, because no more specific guidance has been issued, they will accept reports that you've already got on file. So if the building had already had a water audit or an audit that include water measures, and they implemented some water recommissioning measures, some operational improvements, the city accepts that. So now, if you've already got something that meets standard, it's signed off on by a PE or architect, you're good until more clarification is issued, which is forthcoming. The option, so we see this building has reduced water 8%, but let's say they had gotten an audit. They just went in and did some projects that reduced usage 8%. The requirement for the performance option here is 20%. So they got to implement additional projects to generate an additional 12% of savings. And so the way that the city will look at it in terms of have you met the requirement is what's shown in Portfolio Manager. So those water savings need to show in Portfolio Manager that 20% reduction. It should show up in the bills. It's the way that, the city looks at that information. So the two options would be get a audit, or if you've had one done already, great, within that time period of 2015 to 2019, because this building's due date is 2019. Looking back 5 years, you can submit an audit you already have, get one before the due date, or that additional incremental savings to get to the 20% requirement. So that's example one. Example two, AIN ends in 2, so its due date is going to be a little further out. This is not Energy Star, but it's close. The score is 73, so they could actually get there. They've already implemented some projects that are showing some savings on energy and water over that time period. So this building has a different set of options and a different timeline than the first one, because they've done different things. It's performing better, or excuse me, not well as the prior one. And the AIN is different, so the performance period is going to be different. So this is a lot of options, but first thing, based off of the AIN, the performance phase due date is 2020. So that's the look back 5 years prior to that, so 2016 through 2020. Do the things in the table in that time period, you're good. That's what this means. More options here to performance phase of the ordinance. And again, what makes the most sense for you? Here we've got a little time. We've got about, almost years. So projects, we've definitely got time to do an audit. It's pretty close to Energy Star certifiable. So get there. These are things to discuss with the team, and again, we're happy to help some of these options with you. So again, the performance period is 2016 to 2020. As the table said, one of the options is to get audit and perform the retro commissioning measures. Same if you've had an audit done already during that time period. So if you had one in 2017, it was signed off, meets the ASHRAE requirements for level 2, and a PE or an architect signed off on it, no further action necessary. This is, again, the same example. Would be to get up to certification, do something. It could be operational measures. It could be little projects, combination of the two, to get that score up to a 75 and get it certified. And there's that, CoStar tracks that. Certain tenants look for that when they're searching for space, and it just indicates the quality of management, the good work that your team is doing to operate the building efficiently. That third recognition helps with that. You can get up to 75. That's a really, I think, smart thing to do, get it certified. Third one is to push. And if you've got some projects that make sense, we've got a little bit of time. Maybe you've already got some proposals for projects that you've been kind of waiting to implement. Maybe it's the time. Go ahead and try to knock those out ahead of the deadline and meet the reduction target. So here, they've already reduced 12%, so it's really not a huge increment to get to the 15% reduction. That could get the score up too. and you could get certified. So in this example, the energy reduction target is 15% over that 5 years. They've already done 12, so they got to do the remainder. And the way that we'll look at that is how to show up in Portfolio Manager. As we're saying, even buildings that are Energy Star certified still have to do something with water, either get on it, meet code, or with the reduction targets. So in the first example, this building could get a water audit and implement retrocommissioning measures related to water in that time frame, and that will count. And we recognize that more specific guidance has not yet been issued, so already done something and off on by an engineer or an architect, you're good. You can go ahead and submit that. But this bill is due until 2020, so have some time. Make this question a little bit tricky on purpose. They've achieved 15% water savings, which is good. Performance period here, and so it's 15% from 2014 to 2016. So I want to hone in on that. This is an example where not all of those savings would count because it's a 5-year look back from the client's due date. So we're looking only at savings between 2016 and 2020. So what portion of that 15% savings was achieved within the performance period? That only the stuff that showed up in 2016 would count, which the rules. So same audit. If you got a water audit done in 2015, it would count because not during the performance period, which is 2016 to 2020. So in that example, they're trying to achieve the water use reductions. What portion of the 15% they've already done happened in 2016 within the performance period, and do projects to get the total up to 20 over that performance period. So I hope that's clear. This is an important example because we know this is going to come up, and this is how you would manage that situation. And again, referencing Energy Star is the place where this data shows up for the manager. I'm going fast, but I'm trying to cover some situations that we anticipate you're all going to have questions about. So example 3, this building AIN ends in 5, so it's even further out. A high score, over 75, but hasn't certified. So what are the same solution set here. The thing to do, since they've already got a 76, is just go ahead and get it certified. Get a peer, an architect to read the data, walk the property, submit an EPA, good to go. Don't have to do anything further on the energy side. But still need to look at water. So options for our water are get an audit, do retrocommissioning, or document 20% reduction. So energy performance, already talked about this. Building at a 76, assuming that all looks good and a PE or architect signs off on it, get the plaque done with energy. You go ahead, if they wanted to, and do projects to reduce 15% and get there that way. If for whatever reason they not to get certified, or they could get certified and do this, but wouldn't be required in this case. If you get certified, don't reduce. If you want to get certified and reduce, great, even better. Things that are certified still have to look at water. So same deal as before, water audit, fix things, retrocommissioning measures within that performance period. Or document a 20% reduction. So if you know what the opportunities are in your building, low fruit, go do that. You don't have to get an audit to tell you what to do. If there's projects that make sense, go ahead and do those. The data will go up in Portfolio Manager, and that will suffice. And here, because the AIN ends in a 5, it's for the performance, the compliance due is 2021. So you've got the 5-year look back from that point, the relevant time period. So in this example, if the building had an audit done in 2016, count, because the performance period is 2017 to 2021. If it's done last year, count. So that's important. This first piece of understanding what's the time period is really the key. As I said, we're here to help figure this out. We recognize it's kind of complicated, but once you get it, figure it out. The benchmarking guide is very comprehensive on the benchmarking process. We're adding to that some of the examples for the performance phase, developing a decision tree tool, which will help make this a little easier. We're happy to confidentially review data on your behalf, make sure it looks good, help troubleshoot any issues you may be having. Also, if you share the data with us, we can prepare an energy and water savings plan for you and see what your options are, what the top potential projects might be. Use that as a conversation starter for planning for the performance phase. So happy to do that. It's free, confidential resource. We're funded by EWP, for those that don't know, and SoCalGas to do this work. We use the directory of service providers. For the benchmarking piece, we're going to develop similar directories for energy and water audits and for installers. So it's saying it will be objective, alphabetical order, but we are going to check licensure. We are going to check references. We're going to make it easy for an owner or manager to go to this resource and pick somebody who has experience with their type of building, and hopefully help make the process of getting the right providers involved easier. And we talked thanks about energy and water savings planning. That's the website, and if you have an inquiry you'd like to submit, that's part of what green looks like there. Summary, June 1st is the next benchmarking compliance date. So the building's 50,000 square feet and up, including the buildings that had to benchmark last year, the 100,000 square feet and up. So do it again by June 1st. And what I want to go back to is if the building is master metered, meaning the tenants don't pay their bills directly, they billed back, you already have the you need, so it's going to be faster for you to just upload it. And there's directions on how to do that if you need them. Remember, water does need to be in there too, so if that's in there, just need to make sure it's in there. If the tenants are billed directly, again, need to request that aggregated data as soon as possible. Technically, it's supposed to be done by tomorrow. Utilities take about a month to complete the process. So requests in as soon as possible. How to do that are in the guide, which is available at the website you see there below. The performance phase starts to phase in next year in 2019. So it's again to start planning now. Figure out, what is the AN for each property that I'm responsible for, and what's that 5-year look back, and then what makes sense to do at property in the time we have with the we have. Keep everybody's aware of the rebates and incentives, keeping good records to be able to substantiate the projects that have been done. So it was a lot. I'm sure we're going to have some questions. And I would encourage everybody to sign up for updates on the same website. We send out emails to everyone who signs up for updates as of concrete developments, whether it's coordination with the state, new utility incentives, issuing updates on energy and water standards, audit standards in the future, as well as on retro commissionings. So thanks, everybody. And we have about 10 minutes for questions. Okay. Okay, question. Document improvements is 5 years ago. Will LABWP and SoCalGas provide whole building data for this time frame? Is the answer to that. Where that certain buildings that are going to be early in the lottery for the performance phase, I may need data back from before 2016. That of buildings was to figure out, DP is going to have to figure out, because their system allows them at this point to aggregate data from 2016 forward. So if your performance phase includes dates in 2015, 2014, some will. That's due. We have raised that to them. They're working it with IT. If you have a building that's in that scenario, please let us know as soon as possible, and we can talk about options there and flag those for DWP. That's a great question. Very good question. Oops, lots of questions coming in. Question about accepting a EBEWE water sense score, performance metrics. So the EBEWE score, I think that's good information to have. All that's required for the ordinance is that the data be entered. The water use intensity will be reported, but not a score, and doesn't count towards your Energy Star score. Is working to develop similar to the Energy Star score for water. They have one for multifamily, but not any other property types. So anyway, to answer the question, there is no water score that's required. Putting the water data in there is needed to come up with the water use intensity. That's what's reported. Really good question. What if the ownership and or operation management has changed in the 5-year period, making the reduction targets unreasonable? That's another really good question. The manage that is beyond my ability to answer right now. A valid point. If the bull and the previous owner is able to hand over data, would be great. We recognize that's not often done in practice. So again, another that we are aware of, and appreciate you bringing it up. If you have it's like that, please do reach out to us, and we'll surface that to the office, building and safety, WP, and see how to come up with a fair solution. Because you're right, that's not fair if you just took over a building where before performance deadline and had no time to do any of this. So we are aware of that, and we'll figure out a fair way to deal with it. Keeping question, can we get a copy of the PowerPoint? Yes, we will send this around along with a recording, and we'll recap some of what we hope are key takeaways. More comes soon, so we will be circulating all of that. And if any other questions come up, please don't hesitate to reach out and sign up for updates on our website. With that, any other questions coming in, so I must have just covered everything. Thank you all, and we'll be in touch very soon. Oh, one question. A 600,000 square foot condo complex, but part into 90 buildings, and the largest building would be less than 10,000 square feet. The is looking at individual building, so this property should be exempt because it's not doesn't meet the size threshold. Each individual building needs to meet the size threshold. So that property should be exempt. If you got a letter from DS, then you want to reach out to them to clarify, hey, actually a bunch of different buildings, 90 different buildings, are all very small. 600,000 square feet. About the energy and water audit retro-commissioning requirements, says that it would be an energy and water audit and implement retro-commissioning measures that are uncovered through that audit. So I hope that's clear. It's consistent with what the ordinance says. Great. So thank you, everybody, for the great questions, great thought questions, for tuning in. We'll be circulating the slides and the recording, and look out for further updates from soon. Thanks again.